A few logistics before we get started. I already stated this, but if everyone can have their mic muted and ask questions via the chat, that would be wonderful. If we don't get to your question tonight, I will put in the chat the senators' legislative emails, and you can follow up with them that way, or you can keep an eye on Mobilize, and we will be scheduling other town halls in the near future. We will be wrapping up at 7 p.m., so about 90 minutes from now. And I'm going to turn the mic over to the three senators to very briefly introduce themselves before we start taking questions in the chat. Okay, Senator Cummings, do you want to start?
Okay, yes, I'm Ann Cummings. I'm the senior senator, and I chair finance. I'm sitting in the finance room right now, and in the mornings, I serve on health and welfare.
Great. Senator Perchlik, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Senator Andrew Perchlik. I live in Marshfield. I'm sitting in the Senate Appropriations Committee where I'm chair, and then in the mornings I'm on the Transportation Committee. And so happy to talk about transportation issues as well as other priorities like property taxes and housing and anything else you want to talk about.
Yes. Senator Watson, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Ann Watson. Thank you all for being here. I am the chair of the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee, which is where I am right now. And then in the afternoon, I am on the Appropriations Committee with Senator Perchlik.
Great. Okay, thanks you three. I think we're ready to jump into questions, and we got some questions via email, so I'm just going to start with one, and then everyone else feel free to put your question in the chat. We will do our absolute best to get to your question, and yeah, okay, so I'm going to start with a question from John Peterson. He is wondering why Vermont is only one of 8 states that still tax our older or disabled residents on Social Security payments.
Okay, I guess I can take that one since we do taxes. Our tax policy in Vermont has traditionally been based on ability to pay. So I believe we are now up to an annual income of up to $92,000 for a couple. If you're under that, we don't tax your Social Security. We do that for pensions, and we try to keep it so that we're giving tax relief to those with the least ability to pay and continue those taxes on people with the ability to pay. Compared to other states, we have a small tax base. We don't have things like extraction taxes or slaughterhouse taxes or some of the other ones I've heard of. So we try and keep it based on your ability to pay.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is it comes up every year, and there's usually bills to change it. Last year we did raise the income so that more people were not having their Social Security taxed, and we did this also with the military pensions, where you get that if you're low enough income. But if you're making a lot of money, that ability to pay, as Senator Cummings had, then you do pay the tax.
Yeah, I think you all covered it. I don't think I have anything to add on that one. So, thank you.
Okay, I have a note in the chat. Can everyone make sure they're muted besides the senators and me? We're hearing some background noise, and unfortunately, I don't have the permission settings to turn off your microphones. But we're gonna ask questions via the chat. So if everyone could mute themselves in the bottom left-hand corner, thank you. Okay, our next question is from Beth Stern. She is wondering if the senator is familiar with H-585, a health insurance reform bill. Specifically, this bill includes age rating, which essentially would be an age tax on older Vermonters.
No.
So this is not a bill that I am familiar with, but I'm glad that you've raised it so that we can be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, I have not seen that one either.
So it's a House bill, so maybe it didn't make it to the Senate already, but I can actually look on the legislative website and see where it is right now.
Okay, I guess I can say, as an older Vermonter, that as we've worked through Act 73 and the property tax exemption based on income, I'm doing everything I can to be a voice for older Vermonters who bought their house 40, 50, 60 years ago. The value has gone up, but their income hasn't. And their ability to downsize is very limited in some areas because we are not building those small starter retirement homes that used to be available to move to. So I am watching that. I can't make any promises, but there is an issue there.
Yeah, I did look it up. 585 has not gone anywhere. It's still in the House Health Care Committee.
Yeah.
I doubt it's going anywhere, but thanks, Beth, for giving us a heads up to keep an eye out for it.
Mhm.
We wouldn't support it, or at least I wouldn't support it.
Yeah, Beth, you could look up on the Vermont Legislature website what House members are in that committee, and you could feel free to email them at their legislative emails. They would see that. Okay, let's move on. Ann Buttimer says, what are the senators' positions on S-270, a bill to provide the right to charge electric vehicles at condos and common properties?
Wow, so glad you asked this question, Anne. This is a bill that I sponsored and from a constituent that we had in Stowe that had had a problem with their condo not allowing her to charge her car in her own driveway. So it's not going to be passed as a separate bill. My understanding from the folks on economic development, housing, and general affairs is that there are several other bills been introduced to deal with condo association rules and housing associations. So this is going to be part of that bill. So I don't know what the rest of the bill is, but I definitely support requiring, not allowing condo associations to prohibit it.
Yeah. Good.
That is fine.
Yeah, I guess I would add, so that's just in general on electric vehicles, that's something that our Natural Resources Committee has taken some testimony on, and it does seem very clear that over the lifespan of a car, an electric vehicle is a cheaper option than the alternative internal combustion engine car. And so ensuring that people that either live in condos or apartments have access to charging, I think is actually an equity issue, especially getting, the ability to save money, to the people who need it the most. So it's something that I'm very interested in, and appreciate that it can be tricky to try to change condo association bylaws. My understanding is that it might be something that gets worked into homeowners association bylaws moving forward, not necessarily backwards looking. But we'll see how that plays out. But it is something that I'm very interested in.
Yeah. 2 years ago, I was on Housing and Economic Development. We actually passed out a bill dealing with this. I think everyone agrees that you should have that right. The issue gets to be
Oh, that's one sec. Okay.
Okay, anyway, the issue got to be, who pays? You know, if you have a garage or you can pay, but you've got a parking space adjacent, if you're on the second floor, we have older apartment buildings and there's an installation cost. If it's an older apartment, you might have to rewire the whole place. So that's where it got, you should have the right to do it. The question is, who pays the cost to do it?
Mhm. Okay.
Oh, Senator Persick, you're muted.
This
Am
bill
I?
is the
No.
bill that Senator Cummings was talking about, the right to charge, because we did run into issues of the rights of the building owners. And I just did see Lynn's comment in there that make sure that the building can handle the charge. And so the bill does talk about all electric codes and need to be followed. So it has to, and you need a electrician. So, but if somebody is going to pay for it and get an electrician and install it properly for their condo or house in the housing association example, that they'd be allowed to do that.
Mhm. Okay. I am going to move on to the next question. I'm going to combine two questions about education and how we're funding education. The first question is from David Healy. He's asking, what is the likelihood that there is any movement to fund education with taxes other than property taxes or revenue sources other than property taxes? And we have a question from Priscilla White. Similarly, what are the plans of the legislature to figure out how to fund affordable health care, especially in regards to the cost of our?
I can start, Andrew, and you can finish. This year, Act 73, the education bill last year, looked to a second homes tax. That's in there this year. There will be an adjustment in the House Ways and Means to the percentage that's paid. It will go to non-homestead residential. It will take another year or so to put that into effect because all of your town listers and town clerks have to go through and determine what is a second home. It will be suitable for habitation year round. So we're going to leave out the deer camps and hopefully, most of the summer camps that are on the lake and pick up the true second homes, people that because it is a second home, it is not their primary residence. Many of those are wealthier people and they are not paying any income tax into this state. So we will be picking them up. I think 27 is as soon as they think all the legwork can be done. We're looking at the tax code, but I'm going to send it over to Senator Perchlik because the income tax, which is our other main revenue source, is the primary source of revenue in for the general fund, which funds everything other than education and transportation in the state. The education fund also gets all of the sales tax revenue. So we got a real boondoggle when we went to be able to tax online sales. We got something like $20 million into the ed fund in 1 year on that, but we've spent it. So there isn't a whole lot out there. We're looking at doing some taxing on the top end, but we haven't found any other way to do it. Now, let Andrew talk about what the general fund is looking like.
Yeah, as far as funding education, other than property taxes, as Senator Cummings mentioned, we do put some other funds in there, the sales tax, and also a third of the purchase and use tax. So when you buy a vehicle, a third of that goes into the education fund, although there's an effort from the Transportation Committee and the governor to move that back to that third that goes to the education fund to go to transportation, because the transportation fund is in not a deficit, but we're lacking $33 million if we're going to fully draw down all the federal funds that we could draw down. So they're trying to fill that hole. The other part of general fund that we're looking to fund in the education fund with is the $74 million of funding that we had at the end of last fiscal year that was above what we had budgeted for. And the governor, and it seems legislative leaders are agreeing to use that 74 million to buy down the property taxes. So that 74 million of general fund will just be moved to the education fund to lower how much property taxes that we get. But I think as far as a new tax for our education fund, Senator Cumming mentioned it would be the second homes tax. That would be the prime thing in there.
Yeah, the governor's proposal in his budget was to remove $10 million a year in that purchase and use tax. An additional $10 million up to $50 million out of the education fund into the transportation fund. I don't know if we're going to agree with that, but that is the proposal that he's put on the table. That will be a further deficit. And the general fund for the last 3 years has sent over anywhere from $75 to $100 million to buy down the property tax. So as terrible as your property tax bill is, it is several cents lower than it would be if that general fund transfer hadn't happened. That money, we are sure, will not be there next year. And the full increase from school budgets will hit the property tax rate.
So the only thing I would add to that is I'm very supportive of the taxing second homes. I'm very supportive of any other efforts that that the Finance Committee has in terms of, as you said, Senator Cummings, finding money at the top end, which I think there's some options for that. And then the other thing I would add is I do have a bill which I don't think is moving anywhere this session, but something to potentially keep in mind for the future is that so there's a sales tax on on heating fuels, but that is exempted for all residences, and that's great. But that exemption from the sales tax, which goes to the end fund, extends right now to second homes and to Airbnbs, and so
Residents.
chewing that up, it seems to me if we're going to subsidize people's fuel oil, that perhaps it does not need to be subsidized for second homes or for Airbnbs, as if it was a business that would have the sales tax on it. So something to potentially keep in mind for the future.
Thank you. Our next question is from Farnham Stephen. Maybe it's Stephen Farnham. I don't know. It says Farnham Stephen.
Farnham.
Okay. Okay, great.
Steve.
Steve is wondering, with so much federal funding clawed back, where and how will these funds be made up? Or will there be a dramatic reduction of services?
Andrew?
You want to take that, Senator Pritchett?
Well, yeah, well, I can start. Like, there will be a reduction in service. Like we got a memo today from AHS about reductions in SNAP. There's, could be hundreds, if not even thousands of people that aren't eligible if they don't, follow the new guidelines. We won't really know how many people are not going to get them because, we don't know how tough it'll be to follow the new work requirements on SNAP. But if people can't meet that new work requirement, I would call it a drastic reduction. Same with the health insurance, I think, is the other really big one. With this Affordable Care Act, insurance rates going away, people are getting insurance premiums that are just completely unaffordable. So they're going without insurance. And when you don't have insurance, you could get into medical debt. You could have drastic reduction of medical care services, and it could put other, strains on our system. Those are the two that come to mind. But we're seeing in other places, like we heard in appropriations today, Department of Public Safety is expecting money that back in October, but they just haven't got it yet, and they're getting very close to not being able to make payroll if they don't start getting this money. And I've heard from other agencies that you would expect to be so reliant on the federal government that they just haven't received it yet. So we don't really know the full extent. The Congress did pass some appropriations bill, like they did fund some of the programs like Section 8 housing. For a while, they were talking about cutting that drastically, like in half. So we don't know the full effects of the federal drawdown, but there's no way we could backfill it with state funds. We just don't have enough funds. So we'll do what we can with the limited funds we have, but if the federal government continues the path they're on, there will be some difficult service reductions, I think.
Well, it's also probably worth mentioning that we did set aside $50 million. Do you want to speak to that as well, Senator Person?
Yeah, last year
Yeah.
we set aside 50. We already used some for the SNAP payment we made when there was the government shutdown. So we're down whatever that was, $6.4 million. And then in the BEA, we talked about using some money to backfill that Section 8. We might be used $5 million. So that pot is, I think, kind of the last pot that we have. The governor's proposing to use another money that we have for $30 million for property tax relief. We might do that, but we're kind of holding on to it to see what the worst part of the federal pullback will be, so we can use that money, whether it's going to be food, housing. The kind of, we're looking at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs here, unfortunately.
And we are watching the healthcare, I believe it's tomorrow, sometime this week. We're trying to figure out if people did drop off the exchange. We're monitoring that as the premiums started to go up. And so we're keeping an eye on that. We're also starting to look at, in health and welfare, we're working on trying to do free primary care. And we're working with the hospitals. It's a little slow going, but trying to reconfigure the hospitals so that all the services remain available, but maybe not every hospital can afford to provide every service, and trying to do that. Reference-based pricing is in the works. It is the law. But I believe it's something like 10 or 12 of our 14 hospitals are not operating in the black. Some of them are seriously red and in danger of going under if we play with their revenue too much. So we're walking a thin line there, trying to maintain service, and trying to make sure that everybody can get the service they need. We're also looking at transportation. We know as our population ages, getting to, especially in rural areas, getting to medical appointments is a problem. So we're working on that, but there's just a lot out there that we're trying to understand and then to figure out what and how we can backfill.
Well, and one of the things that I would add too, this is not a clawing back of money, but particularly with the Agency of Natural Resources, they depend a lot on the expertise of folks at the federal level, and with layoffs or just department changes at the federal level, the expertise that they interact with is eroded going away. So that's also affecting our programs as well.
Okay. Our next question is from Elise Miller. She is saying, as a young couple, her and her partner, who just moved to Vermont for grad school and law school, are there any bills that you could point to this session that help incentivize young people to remain in Vermont after they graduate?
It's a great question. I mean, I like the part about the creamies in particular, but we do have some tuition reimbursement programs for critical
Care.
positions. And we're trying to do more for like primary care doctors, but there's been work on nurses, and we've done it for Vermont Guard members and things like that. So it's been specific careers, not general. I think the main thing we're trying to do to make it affordable for Vermonters to stay here is all the housing work that we've been doing, and Senator Watson can talk more about that than I can, but we got to make housing affordable for people to be able to.
Do you want to say something, Senator Cummings?
No, I was going to say, I know you're doing, having been on housing, there's a balance going on between housing and protecting our natural resources. So I'll let you talk on that one.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great question, because it really does come down, I think, for a lot of folks, to affordability. Before I talk about housing, I do want to just point at the huge amount of work that we did on childcare to make childcare more affordable in the state of Vermont. And as a mom of a young human, I am very grateful for that work. But housing really, it is one of the largest expenses that young people or anybody has in the state of Vermont. And so one of the things that we did in the last year or so was or the last couple of years, was to do an overhaul of Act 250. When we talk to developers about what the bottlenecks are for developing more housing in Vermont, the number one answer is money, right? Like the projects don't pencil out very well because of the cost of labor and materials. There are restrictions around regulations in Act 250 that brings, and the risk of appeals, and the time that it takes, and all the delay that happens ends up making projects more expensive. And so we passed a bill a couple of years ago to reform Act 250 to make it much easier to build housing in places that we knew are places that we want to have housing. So places like our downtowns and village centers, and our designated like neighborhood areas, and growth centers, like that kind of area. And so that that bill that we passed is now referred to as Act 181, and it's rolling out now. So it is still in process, and it's experiencing some hiccups along the way. And so to make sure that goes well, we are looking at that now to make sure that municipalities have what they need to make sure that they are able to enjoy as much of the exemptions of Act 250 as is possible and reasonable for them. So that's sort of our big housing bill right now, is to make sure that we're able to continue on that path, so that Act 250 is not duplicative in places that have planning and zoning, which is something that has been true. Especially speaking as the mayor of Montpelier, I've lived the duplicative nature former mayor of Montpelier. I've lived the duplicative nature of Act 250 in a place that has robust zoning. So that's moving forward, and should also, I mean, the vision there is that every town, not just like the Montpeliers of the world, that every town should have at least an area that is either allows for priority housing projects, or is able to has a designated area that can have some level of exemption from Act 250. And then the other side of that is higher protections for critical natural resources, and we're working on making sure that those are appropriately narrow. So that's I'm happy to speak more about the details of that if that is helpful, but that's sort of the gist of what we're looking at right now.
I don't, Senator Watson mentioned the child care bill, but we actually just got written up in the New York Times. It was a tax increase. We put in a payroll tax coming out of COVID because the business community was very clear that until they got child care, their workers couldn't come back to work. And we have managed to be able to subsidize the child care system so that it is affordable for most Vermonters, if not all. We are in the process now of licensing child care workers and centers to make sure that you really do have high quality people with the background in child development needed to provide a first class program. No more just sitting them in front of the TV, as some legend said that happened. I don't know, but these will be top quality childcare. So that's important. I think we're doing a lot in affordable housing. That is this two definitions. The traditional one of affordable is it is perpetually subsidized because the people that live there can't afford the rent it takes to cover the cost of building it. And so that rent is being subsidized. The other affordable housing is that starter home, the retirement home, those little ranches, one level. That's harder. There's an inherent cost in Vermont because unlike the rest of the country, at least until recently, we get hard freezes. And so slabs are not particularly desirable here where the ground freezes and we have to put in basements. That adds a cost. But over and above that, the market demand is there and the market isn't responding. And that's nationally. And it seems to be that with the cost of material and the cost of labor, the market can't produce the homes at a level that the average working person can afford. And that is more difficult to solve. It would be greatly helped if we could get a federal, something on the scale of the GI Bill without all its inherent problems. But it is very hard for the state to figure out how we're going to do it. We do as much as we can. And the Vermont Housing Finance Agency has been very creative and we work very well as a group, but it's a problem.
Well, and if I can add just a little bit more, since we're talking about housing, one of the other strategies that the state is working on right now is something called 802 homes, which again, trying to reduce the cost for housing in any way we can. And so this is bringing back the idea of Sears catalog homes, if you're familiar with that. So they've come up with 10 different blueprint designs for homes that are modeled after real homes in Vermont that could make it so that people who are developers don't have to pay for a new design, that these designs would be free to folks who want to build them, and then it's available. Some of them may be able to be built through panelization, which is basically saying that like you can build the wall sections indoors, which is great. So you can do the site prep at the same time as like building the structure that's going to be the home. And so that saves time, it saves money. And so there's actually some education for people who are interested in that. There's actually a meeting this Saturday in Montpelier for people who are interested in learning more about the 802 homes, which is, I think is also very exciting.
But you also might want to check your local planning and zoning because site work is a major part of the cost. And if it costs $200,000 or $300,000 to do the site work, that adds to the price of the 802 home. And I live in, according to the city lister, a very nice house in the city of Montpelier. It is a small residential neighborhood, and we do not have sidewalks. To build my neighborhood again, they would have to put in cement sidewalks with granite curbing. There would have to be open space, planting. That all adds to the cost. So in some ways, in wanting to create the perfect, we as a group have become an evil to the good. And there's a book out now called Abundance. There's a lot of rethinking that rules we put in to solve a problem 20 years ago might be keeping us from solving the problem that we have today. And I think that's where we're trying to do a new think here. Is there a way we're part of the problem? All of us generally.
Okay. The next question is from Linda Gray. Do you expect the Vermont legislature to adopt a new map of school districts? If the map is not adopted in 2026, what happens to the rest of Act 73 provisions?
Nobody's on education, huh? I can start because my committee is responsible for the education fund. Technically, the way Act 73 is written, that until new districts are formed, nothing goes forward. However, there is this little phrase, notwithstanding, which means that at some point we could go in and change anything we want to change. I think what we're struggling with is, what do we change? Just learned this afternoon that the Senate Education Committee is looking at a map. It is different than the House map. I don't know what that is. I haven't seen it. I gather it is on their website for today. If you go on the Senate Education Committee, you can see it. I think we're all struggling with what to do. I think we all know that we need to do something. We've been looking at taxing the rich in my committee. We're going to get your millionaires that own second homes. But the bottom line is, we've only got around 1,000 people who would make it into that millionaire fund. And right now we're 1/4% tax rate below Massachusetts millionaires tax, but we start at 300,000, which is pretty low. And, if we took probably half of everything they have, we probably still couldn't fund everything we want. There just isn't the money there. So we're trying to make sure that we are being fair and getting money that we can get without doing harm, like having a mass exodus, or people could stop endowing theaters and arts projects and police stations and museums and hospitals. So you're always walking that balancing act, but it's a relatively small group, and we're not sure if any of them at this point, we've got witnesses coming in, are actually in that top 2% or 3% that's talked about that got massive tax cuts. I mean, federally, they talk about multi-billionaires. And if they're here, they probably are second homeowners or visitors. So we're we're walking it through. And that top tax bracket tends to have a 50% turnover every year. That if you sell something, I've got a faux Mickey Mantle card sitting at one of my senator seats. If you sell your real Mickey Mantle rookie card, you would be in that top tax bracket for 1 year. But you wouldn't be there the next year. If you sell your business or your farm, you can end up in that bracket. And it's the rich are no more all the same than any other group, ethnic, financial, that you can name. They're all individuals and they're all very different.
I just put the link of the map from the Senate committee. And there's also a handout that explains the map by itself is a little confusing. I think there's a separate one pager that the chair, Senator Bongartz, put out. He admits that he got the map wrong, but it's the starting point for the Senate conversation. But yeah, people should look at it and let us know what they like or don't like with either the Senate map or the House map, because I think there's a lot of pressure from the governor to have a map, or at least to have Act 73 move forward, like Senator Cummings can do it. We could move towards the foundation formula without a map, because we can just kind of rewrite the law to not require a map. But I think some kind of map is likely, but it could be, which I think Senator Bongartz's map is it's just it's starting point one, but he's also talking about setting some big districts and then saying within that there could be voluntary mergers of separate districts. Like he wants the locals to fill in the details afterwards. At least that's what we heard very briefly today, like just got announced.
And what the governor has said is if we don't, he will veto the budget and all the tax bills. I've been through that with him twice before. He has done it. He is serious. And in Vermont, the Constitution does not allow like a continuing resolution like they have. You can finish up, if you've got excess in your budget, you can stay until that budget ends, but then you go home. I think the big thing that starts to focus is everything would shut down July 1st, the start of the fiscal year. That means that the state parks would shut down, which means there would be a lot of really unhappy tourists that are planning on coming to Vermont for a week or a month and find out that the state park they were going to is closed. That will have ramifications to our tourist industry for years, and we need it. Public safety would shut down. Everything shuts down. The first time he did this, we clawed back money from schools. The second time we did the statewide teachers' healthcare bargaining statewide. I served, I guess we're finished on the Commission on the Future of Education. And one of the things we agreed upon is having salaries and benefits bargain, because salaries are done at your local school district and the benefit, the chief one, is done somewhere else. And that's really limited the school's ability to negotiate. We couldn't agree on what level that should be negotiated, but it was agreed that it is problematic
Watson,
to
did you
have
have anything
those
on
done.
Well, I would add that I voted against Act 73. I have a lot of skepticism about the use of maps and honestly a foundation formula as well in terms of as a mechanism to force closures. I guess I'm encouraged to hear that Senator Bongartz, who's the chair of education, is interested in more voluntary mergers. So I'm interested to see what that could look like. And then I feel like there's I guess I would also express just some frustration with the governor, honestly, that that he is holding us hostage.
Mhm.
It's his plan or no plan. I think that shuts down creativity and the kind of problem solving that we need to address this. And then I guess I would also add that I think one of the solutions that we need to address through all of this, of course, is the healthcare costs. Because that just ultimately is related to the cost of education. So, anyway, I guess I'll leave it there.
Okay. Our next question is still on the tax front. It's from Josh Howard. Josh is asking, you keep saying second homes, but this affects apartments as well, putting the tax increase on the renter. Not sure what he means by that. Do you see the possible harm of our lowest income residents from increases to second homes tax that affects rentals and adding heating fuel taxes for second homes that would also affect rentals?
Do you want me to speak, or do you want to go? Well, I will just say thank you for bringing that up and giving me the opportunity to clarify that the intention is not for it to affect apartments. And one of the ways that you can get to that is that homes are either you have a homestead declaration or you have a landlord certificate. So that's one way to make sure that we're not getting to apartments, because definitely, the average Vermonter cannot take more taxes, and that it's all about the definitions, right? So it's making sure that we get our definitions right to make sure that the average Vermonter would not have that additional burden. Yes, Senator Cummings, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I was just going to say, we know that's a potential problem, but it is, if there's a landlord certificate, then you are residential and you are year-round residential. And so that would excuse them is the mechanism right now. And the tax department has done an excellent job with getting landlords to file their certificates. It was a problem for a while, but they, and if this keeps you from being taxed as a second home, they will very likely be, right now they're a business. They're not classified as residential because it's a business. So, but if you have a landlord certificate, then that would be a way to exempt them.
Anyone else have anything on that? No? Okay. I'm gonna move on to Nona Estrin's question. She is wanting to, it's not a question, but I think she wants you all to talk about the ICE related bills this session. So that's 208, the anti-masking bill, and 209, that is the civil arrests in sensitive places bill.
Right.
And there's,
There we go.
go ahead, Ann Watson.
Oh, well, so on the specifically on the masking bill, one of the questions that I had was, is this not somehow federally preempted? If are we trying to create a rule that would apply to ICE agents that don't apply to our local folks? And can we in the state create a rule that would apply to the federal government? Like, how does that work? And the answer that I got for that is that it's not federally preempted. And because the federal government happens to be silent on this issue, then we can make a rule that would require that law enforcement not wear masks. And I think if I'm not mistaken, there are certain exemptions, like if it's extremely cold, or if it's something, things like normal exemptions that we would anticipate, but that does apply to all law enforcement officers,
Right.
operating in Vermont, not just ICE agents. So it's not calling them out specifically. It's just a law that we expect all law enforcement, including federal law enforcement, to follow in this state, which I was very encouraged about. Especially, you don't know if these people are kidnappers or bank robbers or what they're doing. It's so terrifying. So to be able to have a record of their face and that they need to be able to provide identifying information,
Right.
I think is at least one step. It's not going to solve it, but it will help.
And that passed the Senate with 2 negative votes. We also passed a resolution expressing our concern with the actions that have been taking place with ICE and immigrants. I don't know, I haven't read the news today, but as far as I know, there hasn't been a new onslaught since Minneapolis and Portland. So maybe the pushback is working, and we should take, I think, some pride in that as the people of America and of Vermont, that we have drawn a line, and they might actually be listening.
I'm not holding my breath, but I like the keep hope alive, as Jesse Jackson said. That resolution that Senator Cummings mentioned did pass unanimously, which was encouraging. And there's also another bill that the Education Committee considers a third leg of the stool, together with S08 and 09, and that's S227, that creates schools and other locations of being safe areas where arrests cannot be made.
May I ask a question?
Where's Aaron?
Hi. Can you put your question in the chat, please? We're not
Yes, I
taking
will.
questions.
Okay.
Thanks.
That is Nona.
Okay. Thank you. Are you guys finished answering that question
Yeah.
specifically? Okay. Okay. So our next question is from the TVSC Executive Director. She has a statement and then a question. Calais and Worcester voters voted to keep our schools open with the understanding this would be honored by the superintendent and the board. However, they are now saying that they have the power to send our pre-K kids to East Montpelier, even though there are between 11 and 13 kids to make up a pre-K class. This is directly against the voters. Consolidation doesn't save money and it decimates small towns. Shouldn't that vote be honored?
Yeah, it is true they have the power to do it. Whether they should do it, is a separate question. I like the idea of local control. As far as Act 73 goes, what I think needs to happen with local control is that also local tax spending is also kept local, because we have a tax or a school education system that's kind of separated from how you vote and what your taxes are, or what your school board's budget is and what you pay in taxes is not a direct connection because of our statewide system and the complicated way that it's figured, which has helped with equity, but it kind of removes the costs. But if a town wants to keep a small school open and is willing to pay the cost to do so, I think they should be allowed to do so. But if we're going to have other people pay the costs, then that's where you get into the situation where a supervisory union or a larger district does have the power to close those schools, which we've seen happen. But I would like them to abide. They said they shouldn't have had a vote if they weren't going to abide by the local voters. That would be kind of a farce. So that's, I hope that they would abide by it, especially until we see what's going to happen with Act 73, because maybe things will be different.
Okay, and I think everyone thinks that your local vote should be tied directly to your local tax bill. That's what we had. And then the Supreme Court said, no. We had towns in Washington County that had a 28-cent tax rate because they were a ski area and had a lot of second homes that didn't send kids to school but paid taxes. And we had other towns in this state that had 300%, literally, we're talking 28 cents and $3.28. And they weren't, you know, one school had a violin orchestra in their middle school, and the other school couldn't afford a music program. The Supreme Court has said, and that is the law of the land, this is still the United States, that was unconstitutional, that every child had to have equal access to essentially the same quality of education. And so we did Act 60. We let local schools vote their budgets, vote how much they wanted to spend. But then that all goes into the education fund. And the way we dealt with the Brigham decision at the Supreme Court is it gets equalized through math that's above my pay grade. And the tax rate is set for the state as a whole, but it figures all those costs in. We are, and we've known since we started trying to talk about consolidation a decade ago, that there are towns that have enough wealth, that is, the people are wealthier in general than other towns. In those towns, it is easier to vote to spend more than it is in poorer towns, all right? And so we have schools, and in Washington County, we're all, as from Vermont as a whole, fairly middle class, fairly comfortable. And so we pass good school budgets. But the poorer towns in the Northeast Kingdom's tax rate is also paying that part of the school budget. So when that's how, you know, it's a response to a Supreme Court. The new proposal for an education formula is that every school, there's no proposal to close schools. It says every student will have a certain amount of money, and this will be derived from the national numbers as to what is required to do a good education. So we will be the highest in the country. Everybody else is adequate. You will get that amount of money, excluding transportation and special ed costs, and including the weight. So if you have kids that speak English as a second language, have a disability, they'll get the present weights they get. And you will have to budget on that amount of money. You won't be able to export if you're getting $15,000 a student and you're spending 25, you won't be able to export that cost so it gets spread over everybody. It will result, and we have not worked out how, you know, the bill calls for it to be phased up or down. Some schools will have to spend more. Some tax rates will go up. Some will have to spend less. Some tax rates will go down. That nobody has dealt with yet. But the new system will be, you get a certain amount, you can vote to spend up to 6% more in your town. But that's it. You have to budget. You have to live within the budget. 48 other states use a foundation formula. How they pay for it varies, probably 48 ways. but it is the way that education is generally funded in this country. Vermont and I believe Wisconsin are the two outliers. So that's where we have voted to go. Where we will end up is still a work in progress. We understand that nobody wants to close their school. Nobody wants to risk. On the other hand, and we're still trying to trace down, because we apparently don't at a statewide level keep track of property tax foreclosure sales, or delinquencies. There's been a couple press stories about delinquencies going up. We know that the property taxes have reached the point where people just can't pay them without risking their ability to feed themselves, or to heat their homes. And these are frequently the people that built our communities, that were our firefighters and our EMTs and our select board members and even our school board members. So that's the balance we're trying to find. We're trying to find a way to preserve what's best in education, and at the same time, make it so that the people that built this state can continue to live here, and that young people can afford to move in. Because when you buy a house, it's the cost of your mortgage, your taxes, and your insurance that get figured in to whether or not you can afford to buy it. And if your taxes are $10,000 a year, that adds $10,000 to the money you're going to have to come up with every year. And that's having a detrimental effect in places. So we're trying to find a way to do this. And if there were an easy way, we would have done it, but there doesn't seem to be a simple answer.
On that question, I would just add, I mean, I don't live in those communities, so I did attend some of the meetings, but I am not sure all like what all the advertising was around that. But it makes me wonder about people's expectations around that vote. Whether they thought they were voting on something that was advisory, or versus something that was like binding, that was the way the vote went was actually what was going to happen. So anyway, just makes me wonder about that.
Okay. Our next question is from Faye Clark. Faye is saying, sprawl is going to have an effect on the rural character and wildlife habitat that makes Vermont so unique and special. Are there any efforts to encourage more dense housing? So Senator Watson,
yes.
perfect opportunity to jump back to what we were talking about.
The answer is yes, there are efforts to do that.
Yeah.
And in fact, so Act 250, and in case anybody is not familiar, that's just really briefly, Vermont's landmark land use law that has 10 criteria with sub-bullets, but the 10 criteria are checks in terms of, what does this development do for, impacts on schools or impacts on traffic or impact on, wildlife habitat, all of the things that we would expect, actually a normal zoning process to check in on if it was really robust. And also, making sure that the water and wastewater connections are appropriate, all of those kinds of things. So in order to trigger Act 250, there was something called the 10-5-5 rule. And what that meant was, gosh, I'm going to get this wrong, but it was like if you built more than 10 units within 5 miles within 10 years, and that if you were building too fast or too big a development, then you triggered Act 250. And so you had to go through that, go through all of those checks to make sure the development was the kind of development that we wanted in Vermont. But what that ended up resulting in was that we ended up with a lot of like 9-unit developments, so that it would not trigger Act 250, and then like 11 miles away, like, so because it's the 10-5-5 rule. So or maybe I'm getting that wrong, but basically, if you could build just a little bit further outside of the boundary, then you could build another 9 units and not have it trigger Act 250. And so what that ended up doing was inadvertently encouraging sprawl in some places. And so that was one of the many reasons why we did this Act 250 overhaul. So one of the signature attributes of sprawl is that it is cutting into our forest blocks. It's creating forest fragmentation, which interrupts wildlife habitat. And so there's actually a new sub-criteria as a part of Act 181 that I mentioned earlier that encourages clustered development, so that it is not just going up, cutting. There's also something called the road rule, which again is intended to prevent roads from just cutting up the mountain, and then you've interrupted this nice wildlife corridor forest block. So again, trying to encourage development close to the roads, places that are already disturbed, and that actually also is encouraged through. We've actually exempted on a temporary basis until the permanent rules have rolled out. We've exempted Act 250 at places that have water and sewer or suitable soils to accept wastewater as an indirect discharge. But basically, the places that have water and sewer already tend to be places that are near already developed roads. So again, trying to encourage that development close to our already impacted places. So that's one, there's more to be said. We can talk about something called sprawl repair and how we're trying to repair places that have experienced some sprawl already. But yes, there's a lot of attention right now that is going towards preventing sprawl, but also at the same time, trying to encourage more housing in places where we know it makes sense.
Okay. And the home bill of 3 years ago now, the original, if a community allows single family homes in a development, they have to allow duplexes and I think maybe quadruplexes, but that bogged down because if it's quarter acre zoning for quadplexes, started to look a little crowded, but you do have to allow a duplex. So
Yes.
they can't be zoned out. I don't think you can do like 3 acre zoning anymore. We are pushing towards density.
Right.
So, and mostly density in the already developed areas.
Yeah.
Where's Erin?
I'm here, just turning my camera back on and unmuting.
I'll tell you about that, but
I'm here, don't worry. Okay. Kara Hooper is asking, if we solved the health insurance / cost problem, we would take a huge financial burden off our schools and solve that problem. When will we get back on track to having universal health care in Vermont?
I can do that. I'm a veteran of the single payer healthcare wars, and it was done twice. I chaired finance the second time and was actively involved. And both times the bill has come in and the cost bill, the dollars, what it would cost per individuals. And one time it was the Speaker of the House, the next time it was the governor. They just dropped the idea because the cost was so high. You know, what we would have to raise, probably your income tax to cover that cost, was seen as just totally unacceptable to Vermonters. My son lives, and his family live in Canada. They have free health care. They also pay 50% of their income in taxes. I'm told there's a 17% surcharge on the income tax as part of that 50 to pay for universal health care. There is no free health care. I've said if it's starting to cost $45,000 a year for a family plan, maybe we are ready to talk about that again. We have done several things to bring down the cost of health care, which is what health insurance pays for. We've had one of, if not the most expensive hospitals in the country. And we have done some serious work in health and welfare with the Green Mountain Care Board in getting those costs down. And it's had some impact, but the overall cost of healthcare continues to rise nationally. I keep looking at Maine, who has a similar demographic, and I think I would like to get down to their cost. My committee is looking at teachers' healthcare costs, and they are high, and they have a very good plan, and no one wants to take that away. But we do need to find a way to make healthcare in general less expensive. All I can tell you is it is the total focus of the Health and Welfare Committee trying to do that. But again, there is no easy solution that doesn't require somebody giving up something to solve that. And that is, it's a national issue. We've had one of the lowest uninsured rates in the country, and we've worked very hard to do that. And I don't want to see us slipping back. Other places in the country have a much higher uninsured population. And we're watching that very closely because all our hospitals are not for profit. If you don't have insurance and you don't go for primary care, and then you get sick and you show up at the hospital, they have to treat you, and they will. And that unreimbursed cost will get covered by the rates they charge all the rest of us that can't afford insurance. And so you get in this downward spiral, which is destructive and not where we want to be.
But yeah, I agree with the point about trying to deal with healthcare as a way to bring down the education funding to deal with the property tax. So some people have just said, we'll move it over to the general fund. We'd run into the problem that Cummings just said about we'd have to raise taxes to get the money from the general fund. And right now, if people feel, well, one, the governor is pretty clear he wouldn't support it, and we don't have the votes to override such an act. But yeah, we'd have to hear from more people that they would want to have those increases. I mean, we've looked at things like the second homes tax that we already talked about today, and doing some other things like that. But until we lower the costs, not just shift the cost of healthcare,
It's lower.
we're going to have a hard time coming up with the money. But yeah, I think Vermont's population is such that the efforts of a national is hard, but maybe even a regional healthcare program has been talked about. How could we team up with other New England states where it's also discussed often, like in the Massachusetts legislature and in Maine, could we somehow tie up with them to make it a more doable?
It would give us, we did work with Maine, Rhode Island, couple other states years ago when we were working to get a handle on prescription drug costs, and we had the New England Legislative something conference on pharmaceutical costs, and then Maine elected a governor that wasn't quite focused on that, and the whole thing kind of fell apart. It's been done. If we could do a more regional approach and get a big enough insurance pool, so you need young, healthy people paying in and not taking out, so that the money is there when you're older and sicker. You can afford the insurance. So a bigger pool would be helpful.
Okay. Sorry.
Senator Watson, yeah.
There is a bill about universal primary care, which I believe is moving. It's very encouraging.
Yep.
And would love to be, I would love to figure out the universal healthcare situation for Vermont, if that's through a consortium or just, realizing that it would cost us less, even if it was an increase in taxes. That would be amazing.
It would increase taxes.
Okay. We have less than 10 minutes left, so I would encourage senators to keep their responses brief.
Sure.
I do want to get 2 more questions in, so this question and then 1 more. This question from Josh Howard. Instead of school consolidation, wouldn't school choice or a voucher program be more cost effective and cheaper?
I'm not sure if it would be cheaper. I mean, you would have, if it was throughout, you might have some schools that would still have to, if you still have to hire the teachers with the schools would have lower numbers. I haven't seen the data on it. There's support for the school system we have now, but there might be support for allowing more choice. Definitely in certain areas, it's very popular.
Yeah, I think the problem is transportation. If you have choice, if you can get there. But for smaller, more rural, poorer communities that families don't have a second car, or both parents have to be at work at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, the kids really don't have a choice. And it's very different than an urban area where you can hop the trolley and, go by 5 different schools in a half an hour.
Right.
Here, transportation, being rural, works against that being an equitable system.
Right. And I don't see how it would save money.
Yeah, that was going to be the issue I would raise, is that it raises issues of equity, and you end up with basically poorer kids in one school.
Okay, we kept it short, Aaron.
Okay, Aaron.
Okay. Our last question, we did not get to all our questions. I'm so sorry. I will make a note about that after this last question. Is also from Nona Estrin. She has another question about ICE. Is there a bill relating to the provision of legal assistance for immigrants if held by ICE, or something to that effect?
Not that I know
Well,
There's a,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say there's been calls for the state to help fund the legal defense fund. I don't know if there's a bill about that, but people have asked me, could the state put money into that fund to provide that, or could we fund legal aid? Legal aid doesn't have the resources to really do that now, but you know, they do some work for not the detainees, but the detainees' children. Like, so trying to find a way for them to still have stay in Vermont with other caregivers. So there's some work being talked about, but I don't know about a bill.
I'm knitting Norwegian resistance hats for a donation to the Legal Defense Fund. I'm
Well,
not
and
sure I can produce, but that's the most I can do at this point.
Well, and it's worth mentioning that we did have Vermont Legal Aid into appropriations the other day, and they were hoping for some additional money to support the work that they do, particularly as Senator Pershik was mentioning, specifically for children of immigrants who, you know, to arrange for them to be able to stay in Vermont and stay with people who are of the family's choice.
We have time
Yeah.
for one more.
Do we have time for one more? Yes. The most recent question is, can we get a quick answer on MOW's funding? I don't know what MOW stands for.
Me either.
I didn't
Um,
either.
What's that?
Oh, Meals on Wheels.
Meals on Wheels.
Yes, Meals on Wheels.
Okay.
Yes, Meals on Wheels. They did get more money from the House budget adjustment, more money than the governor, you know, above. I can't remember if the governor had any in the 26 budget. And then the Senate added $40,000 to that. That was passed today, an additional 40,000. I can't remember the dollar number. I have it in a paper here somewhere. Maybe Watson remembers from committee how much the House had raised. We raised it another 40,000, as I said. So they're getting some additional funding, as is the Feeding Vermonters program, the food bank. We just have to now have a conference committee with the House, but I'm very certain that would not be a thing that would go away. There's other differences we have with the House, but that's a small one.
Okay, we are running early, so I am going to ask one more question. This question was emailed by Mary Scott. The question is, I have a question for Senator Ann Cummings. As a member of the Committee for Health and Human Services, I think she means Senate Health and Welfare, have you read H446? I think this might still be in the House. Proposing a Vermont Rare Disease Advisory Council, and will you support this? I ask for your support because Mary has a rare disease called Friedreich's ataxia, and she's hoping for your support on H446.
I haven't read it because it's an H bill and it hasn't come over. I know we have Rare Disease Awareness Day on Wednesday, and I'm sure that they will be in. I have talked to the chair about that bill because I have a bill asking in my committee asking to have insurance fund the last treatment that might or might not work for Panda, which the chair of Health and Welfare knows what it is. I don't. It is a rare disease. She is planning to pass out that bill, and I think what we'll do is probably put that question into that advisory committee, you know, because it's $70,000. It's a grain of sand, but we keep putting grains of sand into the insurance pool, and pretty soon we've created a beach, and that's expensive to fund. So we're again just at the exploratory phase, but I most certainly intend to support the bill.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone so much for being here and for all of your amazing questions. I am going to put the senators' legislative emails in the chat so folks can follow up with them via email with their outstanding questions. And please keep an eye on Mobilize and Front Porch Forum for upcoming town halls in the near future. Thank you.
We'll be there. Thank you.
Thank you.